Guys, we're live.
I believe, yep, we are live. So welcome everyone. Welcome to our Best Women's Erotica of the Year, Volume 6 event. And welcome to our virtual event, everyone. And I'm going to introduce the editor of this wonderful book, Rachel Kramer Bussel. And I will see all of you later.
Thank you, Marissa, and thank you to Love Sweet Arrow for having us. I had the pleasure of visiting Love Sweet Arrow in February before, the world went crazy. And it was a very lovely store. So if you're in the Chicago area after it's safe to travel again, I definitely encourage you to go there. And they're a big supporter of our series of erotica, of romance, of indie authors. They're wonderful. You can also check them out online at lovesweetarrow.com. You can get this book, Best Women's Erotica of the Year, Volume 6, which you're going to be hearing about tonight, and other books by all of our authors. So I encourage you to do your holiday shopping or your everyday shopping at Love Sweet Arrow. And I'm really happy that all of you could be here watching us and all of our authors could be here, because I wasn't sure what I would be able to do with this book virtually. And I kind of feel like this is a silver lining of 2020 to get people who live all over the country in the same virtual screen together. So I'm Rachel Kramer Bussel. I write erotica and I edit it. And I am going to be introducing our authors and having them read a little snippet, a little tease from their stories. And then we're going to discuss them. You can ask questions in the comments on YouTube, and I will try to get to as many questions as possible. I think the only thing you need to know about this series is that they're short stories. And in this volume, they're all about adventure. So you'll hear everyone approached adventure a little bit differently, which I think is part of the fun. And I would normally at an in-person event bring dessert of some kind. I could not do that virtually, but I did my best. And we have some cookies by Case on Instagram, cookies by KASE. They have our book cover, and I'm going to show you some cookies representing the stories you're about to hear. So I'm going to introduce each author one at a time, and then they're going to read their snippet, and then I will move on to the next one. So our first author is Evie Bennet, who's a narrative designer who writes fiction and visual novels. Currently, she's expanding on the Rattler Romance Motorcycle Club series that starts with a tortured, obsessive mechanic falling for a wordsmith gang member in We Belong. Bennett is also pursuing a master's in game design. This is her book, Shadows of the Night. And this cookie is going to represent what you're going to hear from her story. So, Evie, will you share a little bit of your story with us?
I would love to. Thank you for that introduction. I'm going to start with something a little bit fiery to get the night off exciting, I suppose. So it's two coworkers. And I'm just going to start. You are so hot right now. She shoots a glare over her shoulder, dropping the balloon to her lap, where it bounces once and hovers before resettling. You're hot all the time, he amends, firmly squeezing her hip. I just feel like tonight is going to be extra special. Maybe it's all the electricity. He nuzzles into her hair, and it does feel like a spark passes between them when he presses a kiss into the nape of her neck. That's what balloons are for, she thinks, holding it close, making something extra special. She taps his thigh. Your turn. The idea of setting her aching feet back on the ground before she has to doesn't seem particularly appealing. Carla scoots off to the side and lets him bear and prepare himself before comfortably straddling him, face to face once more. You feeling good, C? I will be. She places his tip at her clit, closing her eyes and pressing the balloon between their chests. They move forward in their rhythm, Carla sinking down with each pass and taking more of him in. The pressure and poise of the rubber makes her feel stretched and warm and magnetic. drawn to this feeling, drawn to her partner who fills her in a similar, less visceral way. Every time she sinks down, the shape changes. It curves, it extends, it's blowing up and expanding into something full and tight and overwhelming. The squeak of latex and the pressure from within inspire her to ride him harder. There's so much stimulating her nerves beyond just the grinding at her clit. The bulbous compression against her chest, combined with the way Arun gathers and grips her hair, makes her feel like she's rising beyond her aching body and into a plane of pleasure amidst the smeared pink sky. Bobbing, rubbing, she's stretched and shaking. The shutters of her mind crumble and clatter to make way for pure feeling. As the crash recedes, she registers Arun's hand on the small of her back, the warmth of his breath on her neck, and the stillness of his hips. Her eyes feel dewy as she leans forward and pecks him on the lips, lingering just long enough to feel the lethargy set in. The balloon drifts to the side, barely caught by her arm. AC? Yeah. All she wants to do is eat something and go to sleep. You think we could take some of these home? And I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Evie.
They're now
Awesome.
warm.
I think I instructed everyone, like, tease them so that they are really into the story, and then you stop and then they want to read it for themselves. So I think we're off to a great start on that front. Our next author is Mia Hopkins. Mia writes lush romances starring fun, sexy characters who live to get down and dirty. She's a sucker for working class heroes, brainy heroines, and wisecracking best friends. Her favorite form of procrastination is baking. She lives in Los Angeles with her family, and her website is miahopkinsauthor.com. And I can tell you, you can find her baking on Twitter and Instagram. I have one of her books here, Trashed. And this boat cookie is I think her story. It's kind of hard to boil a really sexy story down into like a cute cookie, but
It's
I think
adorable. Okay, so my story is called The Eighth Wonder of the World. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, so in this story, a newly divorced single mom takes her daughter and her sister to a park very much like Disneyland, but not Disneyland. So this is what happens. All right. The skipper, cast member, ride operator, starts the engine and the boat chugs loudly over the water. He speaks into a handset with one hand and controls the steering wheel with the other. He's young, maybe a college student on summer break. The passengers on the boat giggle and groan at his puns. His easy smile is natural in this most unnatural of situations. He delivers his spiel confidently as we take an imaginary voyage over the rivers of the world and pass animatronic animals splashing in the rapids. Take a look at these elephants up here, Skip says. You may think that's water coming out of their trunks, but it's not. Drowsy, I study Skip. He's dressed in a khaki shirt, shorts, and a wide-brimmed hat. His name tag says, Tyler. I can smell him from where I sit, laundry detergent and sunscreen, a touch of sweat. He's tall and lean with a sharp jaw. I wonder what's brought him here to this place and this moment. Watch out for these rocks up here, he says. They're limestone, but a lot of people take them for granite. Between puns, he catches me staring at him. Shit. I try to look away, but his eyes hook mine like barbs. They're an uncertain shade of green, like oxidized pennies. I think of fountains, wishing wells, and secret desires that won't come true if you say them aloud. He holds my gaze for half a second, and like a dart to my gut, I feel it. Heat, desire, or do I? It's been a long time, years. The spark catches inside me, but after everything that's happened, how can I trust myself to recognize what's real and what's imaginary? I blink, and he looks away at last, leaving me blazing in my seat. I glance at my sister, but she's preoccupied snapping photos of Sophie. I look at the other passengers. No one seems to have noticed the exchange between me and the skipper. The boat passes under an overhang. A big waterfall crashes down, enclosing us like a curtain. A fine mist of chemical-laden water bathes our faces. The spray smells like chlorine and grass clippings, strangely familiar, as if my body is dredging up sensory memories I'd buried a long time ago. Skip announces, and here it is, folks, the eighth wonder of the world, the backside of water. He looks straight at me. Isn't it beautiful? And then he winks. Winks? What the fuck? I stifle my smile and look away, trying to be cool. Skip continues selling each corny joke. The boat follows its preordained route, and I second guess myself. How many times does he do this a day? How many lonely women does he wink at every shift? And now we come to the most dangerous part of our journey, folks. Skip says, the return to civilization. Okay, so then the narrator finds a way to slip him her hotel room number. Okay. After a quick pit stop at the drugstore, I return to the hotel room. Housekeeping has made up both queen-size beds with fresh sheets. I shower, shave, and dry my hair. I put on just enough makeup to feel right. I slip on one of the thick, white bathrobes hanging in the closet and stash all of Sophie's toys and books away. Last, I hang the Do Not Disturb sign outside on the doorknob and secure the deadbolt. I check the time. 4 o'clock. I throw the curtains wide open and lie down on the bed closest to the big windows. One deep breath, in and out. Who am I? Who does this kind of thing? I close my eyes and imagine this person into being. A woman, not old, not young, newly single. Her own name, her own time, her own body to do with as she wishes, her own mind. Gently, I place one hand flat against my chest above the V of the bathrobe. With my thumb and forefinger, I trace the hard wings of my collarbones and press the tip of my middle finger into the hollow at the base of my throat. I imagine Skip on top of me, solid, strong. I imagine him kissing me, there, the hot tip of his tongue, tasting the empty space. Beautiful, he whispers. There's a quiet knock at the door. And that's it.
Thank you, Mia. I promise you all want to know what happens after she opens the door. A lot more. Spoiler alert, a lot more. Okay, our next author is Katrina Jackson, who is a college history professor. She writes erotica and erotic romance in her very limited spare time. She's the queen of telling awkward, sarcastic jokes at the absolute worst time. And this book, Office Hours by Katrina. And despite her bio, she's very prolific, by the way. You would not know that she also has like a whole other job and career. And this cookie represents Katrina's story.
Okay. I call an Uber and sit on my front porch lest I change my mind while I wait. I clutch my purse in my lap as the driver takes me to the wrong side of town. The side of town that hasn't been gentrified yet, where there are still trash-filled lots stalked by feral cats. The side of town my well-meaning white colleagues suggested I avoid when house hunting. I stand in front of a warehouse surrounded by a tall chain-link fence, take a deep breath, and then rush forward as I push the air from my lungs. I hand over the $20 donation entrance fee and let the bouncer stamp my hand with the footman insignia, flinching not at his touch, but at the tangible proof that I'm here, that I did this. And then I step into a room full of as much leather as though society events had been draped with silk. I expected a motorcycle clubhouse to smell like stale beer, cigarette smoke, and engine oil. And I'm almost right. The beer at least smells fresh, and the smoke drifting into the rafters isn't from cigarettes. The backlit bar illuminates the low round tables in front of me, while soft spotlights make the dance floor across the room seem mysterious and sexy. Al Green plays over the speakers, his gentle rasp a sharp contrast to the bar full of men covered in leather and jeans. You look lost, someone says, and I jump. The voice isn't too deep or too high-pitched, but it is smooth and playful. I think that's what catches me off guard. Neil had always been so serious. He critiqued every ounce of silly for me. I might be, I say in a shaky voice, wondering at this impulsive decision as I look up at this stranger. Even in my heels, he towers over me with broad shoulders and a smirk and dark, intense eyes. I should shrink from him, but I don't. When he invades my personal space, I swear I can feel his warmth touching all the bare skin I've left exposed. I lean into it. His face is half covered in a dark beard that makes him look dangerous, but when he smiles, I see a toothpick between his teeth. My sex clenches. Facial hair isn't usually my thing, or more accurately, Neil had always been clean-shaven and I'd never known anything else. I can't help but catalog all the ways he's unlike Neil. My therapist assures me I'll stop doing this too, but not yet. Someone invite you? He asks, his eyes lewdly assessing me from head to toe. I saw a flyer on campus. He squints at me and frowns. They card you when you get here? You don't look like a student. It's only when he says that I realize I could run into one of my students, and I'm terrified at the possibility. I shouldn't have come. I splutter and try to turn. Whoa, 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 hold on now, he says, grabbing me around the middle. His big palm slides around my hip, holding me still. I didn't mean that in a bad way at all. He says the last two words to my cleavage, his hand flexing on my waist. I'm not a student, I whispered. Good, I'm not into jailbait.
You, Katrina. I want to start asking everyone questions about their story immediately after they're finished, but I'm going to have us all read and then I will ask all my questions. And please ask questions in the chat if you have them for me or the authors, and we should be able to get to them. Okay, our next author is Naima Simone. Published since 2009, USA Today bestselling author Naima Simone writes sizzling romances with heart, a touch of humor, and snark. She is wife to her non-Kryptonian Superman and mother to the most awesome kids ever. They live in perfect domestically challenged bliss in the southern United States. And you can learn more about her at naimasimone.com. This is one of her novels, Sin and Ink. And this cookie represents her story. Some of the authors have gotten their cookies in the mail, yet some are still waiting on their cookies. So a little tease through your screen here. Naima.
I haven't got my cookies yet, but I'll have each and every one of y'all know when I get my cookies, I'm gonna eat all your cookies. And that sounds so dirty. So the name of my book is, well, not book, but short story is Inked on My Skin. And I'll just say right now that I have a utter, unashamed, fascination and just, I love it with reality TV. I'm a reality TV hoe and I love tattoos. So when I had the opportunity to write a short story, and especially in erotic romance, I just went for it and combined my love of tattoos and reality TV. So that's what I did. So this takes place on something like Ink Masters like that. And so the heroine kind of snuck her way onto the show with her brother's best friend. Her older brother's best friend is one of the contestants. And she, through their history, as kind of like a ratings grab, she snuck her way onto the show because she's been in love with him for years. But they have history. And you're going to have to read the story to find out what history they have, because I'm not starting at that point because, time. Okay, so here we go. Okay, all right. Okay. Oh God. Yes, I've watched him every week on Ink Royalty as if the show was my religion and he my deity. But that was through a television screen. Now he's only several feet away from me and my body is in the midst of a joyous celebration and a fiery rebellion. At 27, 4 years my senior, he hit his growth spurt long ago, and yet he seems taller to me, bigger. A faded black Henley encases his strong, wide shoulders. Equally faded jeans hang off his lean hips, but cling like a stalker to his powerful thighs. Scuffed boots finish off the I don't give a flying fuck if I'm on TV outfit. Unable to stall any longer, I lift my way too enamored gaze to his face. He shouldn't be beautiful, not with those harsh facial bones that jut out like the craggy edges of a mountain, not with the arrogant slash of a nose and a bit too large mouth. God, I've always wanted to feast on that mouth, like it was the last pit stop before hell, a place to linger and get my fill until I spend an eternity burning for it. Esau stills as we near. But as I step onto the stage and stop in front of him, I clearly see the anger swirling in his hooded, molten gaze. No, not anger, fury. He isn't happy to see me at all. I knew this would be a definite possibility, but shit, having a ringside seat to that rage, that disdain, it hurts. I blink, battling back the tears, the soul-searing pain. No way in hell am I breaking down in front of millions of people. He might not want me, but god damn it, he's going to at least talk to me and ink me. What the fuck is this? He growls, not speaking to me, but to my escort. The poor girl glances back and forth between us, a frown etching her forehead. But I don't allow her a chance to respond. He needs to get used to addressing me since he's going to have his hands and needles on me for the next 12 hours. I'm your human canvas, I say, forcing my lips into a wry smile. Surprise. No. The word is blunt and fierce, though his expression doesn't change. Fuck no. Esau, the other woman starts, a tremor in her voice. I'm not sure what's going on, but you have no say in your human canvas, just as I have no choice in what you decide to put on my body. His eyes narrow on my body, and for a moment, I think I catch a flash of heat. But nope, it's gone in the next instant and was probably a trick of the light and my wishful thinking. And yes, I did use my story and our past relationship to get on this show, to get to you. And apparently, the producers thought it would be a real emotion grab for you to help me cover up the scars and pain you were a witness to. How's that for healing and ratings, right? For the first time, his expression changes, and my throat constricts as if a hand slowly closes around it. Pain spasms across his face, and his eyes briefly close. When he opens them again, that mask is firmly back in place. His gaze shuddered. Is this your idea of payback then, Tamison? He rasped. Fuck me over and cost me $100,000? Stunned, I shake my head, but he leans forward, pushing his face into mine. Good. I deserve it. Esau, sit, he orders, turning from me and stalking over to his station. Under the cotton of his shirt, his muscles flex and dance along his back and biceps. Tattoos sprawl up the tight forearms, exposed by the sleeves pushed to just below his elbows, and they crawl up his neck from under his round collar. He's a walking, gorgeous mural. I could study him forever and constantly discover more revelations of him. When he turns back to me, his dark auburn hair falls into his face, caressing his cheekbones like flirty fingers desperate for a touch. Lower your top, he says, in that deep rumble that strokes over my skin. I understand what he's telling me, but my body reacts as if he ordered me to strip for him. My dress has the built-in bra, so I'm totally bare underneath, and my nipples already beat in anticipation. I can barely swallow past the lump of nerves and, yes, excitement as in my throat as I slowly lower one strap and then the other, all without breaking our visual warfare. Here, he thrusts something at me. I look down and grasp the balled up material. It's soft, white, and smells like him. Earthy, woodsy, and all hot male. Cover up with it. Nodding, I take the shirt and press it to my breast before pushing my dress down around my waist, lower, and my gaze shoots to his again. There's no mistaking the heat I see there this time as I push the dress to my hips. It turns his eyes into liquid silver pools. My belly clenches and an empty ache pulses deep and high inside me. But taming the desire is despair. No way I can miss the stark pain mingling with the shocking hunger. I face forward and press my cheek on the headrest, his shirt hiding my breast from the viewing public. As stunning as it might be to realize, Esau could see me as more than his former best friend's little sister. He can't look at me and not see the wounded girl I once was. Minutes pass and finally he shifts behind me, his heat brushing over my bare skin. I gasp as a light, almost reverent caress traces the E etched into my flesh. Before I can react, hell, breathe. His touch is gone and the fine, cool tip of a marker moves over my back in quick, sure strokes. His thighs bracket mine. I don't peek over at the other stages, but I'm pretty damn sure none of the other artists sit so close to their canvases that they're nearly covering them, embracing them. But he's not another artist, and I'm not just another canvas.
Thank you, Naima. Okay, I'm gonna go on to our last author, and then we can ask all kinds of questions. So please ask questions in the chat. Olivia Waite is a former bookseller and Jeopardy champion who writes historical romance, fantasy, science fiction, and essays. She is the romance fiction columnist for the New York Times Book Review, where she reviews romance, both new and old, with an emphasis on insightful criticism and genre history. She lives in Seattle with her husband and their stalwart Minnie Dashund. This is her book, The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics, which if you've read it, you will especially appreciate her story in the book, which is a prequel. And if you haven't yet, it's okay. You can enjoy them both all at the beginning right now. And this is a shell grotto cookie representing her story. Olivia.
All right, so I'm going to be reading from my story, Cabinet of Curiosities. And yes, it is historical. It's also queer as fuck. I really appreciated the opportunity to kind of go a little further back in time than I had in the first book and tell a prequel story that I kind of discovered in the writing of the novel. And so it's very luxurious. I had so much fun. It felt like a little writerly vacation for me. And it was nice to get back to my roots. Originally, I was published in erotic romance. And so this was a nice little revisiting of my pre-historical romance days. So just to set the scene a little, we are in the late 19th century. We are at a place called Rouge Abbey, and the Countess of Moth there is a collector. Phoebe ought to let herself enjoy this evening. It was probably the last comfortable one she was likely to have for some time. Her husband's brother was bound to be furious at what had happened, and now his rage had only one possible target. So she threw herself into activity when the company retired to the breakfast room to sort shells after dinner. One of the Countess's collectors had brought her a wealth of marine shell specimens, and it was habitual at Rouge Abbey for guests to lend a hand with the science of sorting out one species from another. All manner of plates, platters, sieves, and servingware had been filled with shells and set out wherever they would fit. The salt-sodden taste of them pickled the air and lingered on the back of the tongue. Phoebe assisted the Countess's young daughter, Catherine, a quiet girl of 10 who had her mother's gold hair and an eye for the boldest shapes and colors. The Countess herself moved from group to group, offering morsels of knowledge like caramels, her hands shuffling through the array of whelks and snails and mussels and oysters. Phoebe's dread returned in full force once darkness fell. After hours of restlessly turning from one side of the bed to the other, she gave up the struggle and went down to find something distracting in the library. Instead, she found the Countess in the breakfast room. Lady Moth was certainly a distraction, though, her hair let down in long swoops and waves, her rose silk dressing gown loosely tied at the waist, lace fountains at her elbows, the linen of her bedgown split down the long, pale line of her neck. Phoebe's mouth went dry. She pulled her eyes away to the Countess's lovely hands. Lady Moth was sorting shells. Not leisurely, as if it were a round of cards, the way her guests had played it, but methodically, precisely, as if she were assembling the pieces of some great puzzle. Gray beside gray, white against white, the soft clicks of shell against silver, rattling like the claws of some great stalking beast. She turned her head when the light of Phoebe's candle joined hers. "So now there are 2 restless souls out of bed," she murmured. Phoebe stepped forward, setting the candle aside. "Are you looking for something in particular?" "Always." Lady Moth fingered an oyster and then slipped it into a pile with the others. "All of these are ordinary, already known. I am looking for something new, something special." One corner of her mouth rose as her hands plucked a snail shell from the throng. She turned it over and then rejected it, putting it aside. "I had something special once and I want to find it again, or something like it." She shook her head, amusement and resignation mingling in her face. "I can see one problem with that," Phoebe replied. The Countess cocked her head, challenge lighting her face. "What's that?" Phoebe moved forward. "You're looking for one thing. One thing on its own can never be a collection. But look." Her hand dove into the pile of oyster shells, fanning them out. "What's special is when things come together." She arranged the shells to form a rose, just on the verge of blooming, and then added a few spiky whelks in a line like thorns running down the length of a stem. "You could set all of these in the grotto where we spoke today. They'd be beautiful in pattern, catching the light, coming off the waves." Lady Moth's hands fluttered over the shape, coming near, but never touching it. She looked up at Phoebe, an admiring light in her eyes. "You may have something there, Mrs. Attleborough." She smiled. "Some of the best ideas come in the middle of a restless night, don't you find?" Sympathy turned over in Phoebe's breast. She wanted to help if she could. What else do you do when you're restless? I used to fuck my husband. Sympathy died, murdered on the spot by the bolt of pure shock that ran through Phoebe. Sizzling heat followed after, rumbling through her like thunder. My late William, Lady Moth went on, almost dreamily, was everything polite, reserved, and gentle, until his blood was up and his clothes came off. There's not a room, not a surface in this house he considered off limits when the appetite was on him. We had one another bent over chairs, spread out on tables, pressed up against the walls. She touched one finger to the back of the desk in front of her. Phoebe had a sudden vision of Lady Moth there, on her back, skirts flung up, her breasts bare and gilded by candlelight. Phoebe clutched her free hand on the door frame, feeling the wood bite into the pads of her fingers. Lady Moth went on, since losing him, it feels like I've barely made contact with anything. He died, but I'm the ghost. So I walk the halls at night, unhappy and ravenous, desperate for someone to make the blood rush through my veins like it used to. She fixed Phoebe with that skewering glance again and took a deliberate step closer. Do you think there's anyone else around who would do?
Thank you. I feel like you're all so good at this that like everyone could be hanging on for hours and hours just hearing you read your whole stories. So some of you answered this a little bit, but I'd like to know, and you can each jump in whenever, how did you come up with your story that's in the book, touching on the theme of adventure? Whoever wants to go first.
Can I go first? Because this is partially because of Mia. I think the timing is right, but I had literally just read Thirsty, and I was obsessed with how she wrote working class men of color. And I was like, I want more and more of this. And then I had this idea. It's a working class Black and Mexican American, about a working class Black and Mexican American motorcycle club set in my hometown, based on a motorcycle club I literally grew up loving and being kind of obsessed with. So thanks, Mia.
Wow. That's so awesome.
That is.
A friend of mine is a dancer for Renaissance fairs. And she has so many fun behind the scenes stories of visitors and employees getting together. And she also reads Renaissance fair erotica.
That's a thing.
And the thing that she told me was, they're always about knights. Why are they always about knights? Why aren't they about the guy who sells the brooms? And so I thought, who might not get a lot of attention at a place like Disneyland, but not Disneyland? And immediately the Jungle Cruise operator came to mind. They seem to work so hard. I don't know. Yeah, that's all.
So funny.
Yeah, for me, I was doing a lot of research into like the age of exploration. And so adventure to me brought this like kind of like global maps and the whole like imperial enterprise with all its ups and downs, usually downs. But one of the things that I really wanted to contrast was the idea of kind of that background of external, really kind of damaging adventure, as opposed to like an internal, satisfying kind of adventure that healed and helped more than it hurt. And so it was really fun kind of collecting all of these really interesting accessories while showing the kind of emotional sweep forward. And all the dirty bits are always fun.
Well, yeah, like I said, I'm a reality TV hoe. So I just love reality TV, and I have a gazillion tattoos, and I find them hot. I find tattoo artists hot, and being able to mash all that together, yeah, it was a dream come true writing it.
Can I ask you a question?
Uh-huh.
You mentioned Ink Masters before, but was this based on an actual show? Like it's an actual tattoo competition show?
Oh yeah, Ink Masters is a tattoo competition show. Yeah.
Seriously,
And
like
Dave
Project Runway.
Navarro is the host, who I find him. I know he has a big head, but he's totally hot to me.
Maybe I should do a reality show, Erotica anthology.
It should be a genre.
That could be super fun.
It should be a genre. Honest to God, it should be.
I mean, especially if you wanted to set it on like the same reality show, then like a Love Island type situation, and you could get a bunch of authors to
Get me started, Olivia, on Love. We could be here forever.
Evie?
Oh yeah. So I used to work in retail, and like after you would have a big sale, it was like you wanted to go and like celebrate your freedom and like have an adventure, but most of the time you were like, I need to rest my feet for 8,000 years. And like, so I was just thinking about that in the context of like a car dealership, and I was just like, maybe I should like, maybe they would have sex in the car. And then I was thinking about it more, and I'm like, the balloons are the most exciting part of that landscape. Like, why does no one give more love to these freaking amazing things that you can like take home and like take the party with you for when you're ready? You can be chill, you can be awesome. But anyways, I was just like, you know what? We're gonna write an ode to balloons and people who are just like exhausted and exhilarated by all the like hard work that they put into their lives. So that's my inspiration for inflated egos.
And I just picked up on this. We've been doing this for over half an hour. Well played that you have balloons behind you.
Thank you. I had to prop them up with pillows because they kept rolling away because of the air conditioning. But thank you, I tried.
So some of you touched on this. I know a lot, most or all of you come from a romance background. I come from erotica background. I read both. So, you know, when I'm asking some questions that could be applicable to either. But I know in erotica, I think in the public imagination, you know, the mainstream culture, I think there's this kind of assumption that, you know, if you do research for erotica, it's all basically you having sex, which it could be, but, you know, I think we all know as writers, we do other kinds of research too. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think, you know, there's this assumption that if you write erotica, you know, there are a lot of stereotypes around that, which we can get to after this, but I wanted to know, what kind of research have you done for your writing, and what's been your favorite part of your research that you've done, whether for this story or for any of your other writing? Could be watching reality shows or whatever.
It's like my answer to everything.
Well, isn't there a reality show about almost everything?
Yes, there is, actually. And listen, there is a reality show about kink. There actually is. And there's one about sex. There really is. And it's on the Health Channel, actually. And there's one about
you have to tell us the names.
I can't even think of the name of it right now, but there's one about the weirdest sex. There's one about kinks. There's one about when sex goes wrong. There's even one about sex in the ER. They'll take you.
Oh yeah, when sex sent me to the ER.
Yes, I'm telling you, it's all out there. That's not what I use for research, though. I can't pray to God my father doesn't watch this and my mother doesn't see this. But they have the sexiest porn sites out there. Like I don't think I'm pronouncing it right, but is it Belisa? Oh, it's so sexy because it's porn by women for women, and it has. I mean, I know some people like, you don't watch it for the plot. I need some kind of lead up for the plot, but you know, it's so sexy. It has a really great just like vibe to it, and it celebrates women's bodies, really. They do. And so I watched that. I also have a friend who she's just so well studied in it, and so if I have questions I ask, you know, but and a lot of it is imagination too. I mean, I know what I find sexy, and so I write what I find sexy. My husband wishes that I had more sex as I used him for more research. But I'm like, hold up there, Hoss, it's fiction. You know, we got to slow your roll here. So that's what I use for research.
I do a lot of looking at vintage like pornography, which is super fun. I started off as an academic studying ancient Greek and Latin, which is filthy as all get out. I think at one point I knew more dirty words in Latin than in English, but that was when I was really up on my vocab. But some people think like, you know, like real life sex helps with the writing. And for me, it was kind of the opposite, because all this Latin and Greek knowledge and then reading all the romance actually helped me seduce my husband in real life. A very filthy poem of Catullus, and because I made an offhand reference to the dirtiest Latin poetry I knew, and he asked what it was, and so I gave him an impromptu translation, and he was like, wow. And I'm like, yeah. So when in doubt, like, I mean, the forms may change, but it's like horniness is eternal. So
That was a great, I love
T-shirt.
That needs to be on a mug.
It's a T-shirt.
Where do you find this ancient or historical pornography?
Oh, there's actually like, I think somebody was just asking the other day if they digitized some of the really private stuff in like the British Museum and stuff, because they used to have all these locked cabinets where like men could go and look at these things, but the female scholars, they're, oh, what? I don't know what you're talking about. There's a lot of really outrageous statues from Pompeii that are still actually locked away, because the Victorians who discovered Pompeii were like, oh my gosh, there's penises everywhere. And you're like, of course, it's ancient Rome. If it held still long enough, they'd carve a penis on it. So yeah, like this is one of my favorite things. I had a friend send me a postcard once that was just, the description on the back said zooform phallus with pendant tintinnabuli, which sounded super high class. And what it is, it's an animal shaped penis with little dangly bells. So she sent this without an envelope in a postcard all the way across, like from Italy all the way to Seattle. And I was really impressed that that made it at all. I was so proud of the postal system.
That is impressive. I feel like that's like ripe for getting pilfered.
Yeah. And they're starting to put more of those collections online. There's a big digital humanities kind of movement that's making collections accessible. The Smithsonian just put up in the public domain a whole bunch of their collections, and I'm sure a lot of those are naughtier than you'd expect. So there's always good research in like museum collections for me.
Coming to Seattle for a field trip.
I'm going to avoid libraries for research for this. But for this, I tend to get a lot of ideas for stories and for research from, I guess maybe like Naima, like watching a lot of TV. And right around the time I read Thirsty, I was also binge watching Mayans MC, which is the Sons of Anarchy spinoff about a Mexican-American motorcycle club in Northern California. And I'm originally from Northern California. And I was angry about so much of, I mean, I love Mayans, but I was angry about stuff. And so I started doing research because I grew up, so the club I grew up being obsessed with is called the East Bay Dragons. And I was like, well, let me just, because I was saying to my friends who truly did not care that I didn't like how the Mexican-American club like didn't interact with like Black clubs, because that wasn't my experience. And so when they stopped listening to me, I just started doing research. And what I discovered, which I didn't know, is that the East Bay Dragons is the oldest African-American motorcycle club in the US. And it used to be all Black, but when I was young, it was Black and Mexican. And I think it still is. And I was like, that's really fascinating. And so I just binge watched Mayans and listened to these like NPR histories of the East Bay Dragons. And it was the best few weeks of my research life. And then I had to go back to the real world.
That's fascinating. That's cool.
I think lockdown has been hard on me because I get a lot of ideas just by going through the world. I'm like a champion eavesdropper. And so I absolutely just love to listen to people who are unguarded talking to their friends and like stealing their ideas all the time. And it's been hard because I have no one to steal from right now. I really am obsessed with the way that people talk. I love voice and writing, like it's an obsession to me. And so in the last year, I've been listening to a lot more podcasts with lots of interviews, because I just love to hear the way that people express themselves when they talk about their, situations or their careers. And one of the podcasts that's been helping me with the East Side Brewery series is a podcast called Ear Hustle, which is a podcast that started as a project in the media lab of San Quentin Penitentiary. And it's brilliant. Like Ear Hustle is such a great podcast. They've grown where they cover stories from people inside different institutions now, and also people who are formerly incarcerated. So life outside of prison as well. And just hearing somebody else talk besides the voice in my head is so great. I just love listening to people talk about themselves. It's my favorite thing. And so it's been hard to be inside my house, like cut off from that right now.
Mia, is that third book out yet? I know that you had Thirsty and then you had Trash. Like,
no, ma'am. I would really love that third book to be out as well. The year has been tough. I'm chasing this child around, and so I'm not blaming her. She's great. my writing schedule is so different from what it was. I was writing so much, and then she was born, and life has been so different. But I'm thinking about it a lot, if it counts, and putting things in my notebook and listening to podcasts. Does that count? I don't know. I hope so.
It does.
I'm hoping to get it out next year.
Because I remember there's a teaser. There's a teaser in the end of Trashed, and I was like just electrified.
Oh, thank you.
No pressure though.
That was like critical. Priorities. I just wanted to know, like, because if it was already out, I knew what I'm buying as soon as this.
Oh man, thank you. That's really kind. Thank you. The narrator of the third book, I'm obsessed with her voice, because the first two books were narrated by men and gang members, and she's a social worker, so it's a very different headspace to be in. Yeah, it's fun.
Evie, do you have anything to add about your research?
For my research, I like looked up behavioral stuff, because my narrator of my main series is like, I don't want to call her crazy, but like she definitely has unique personality traits, kind of like a really nice, sweet version of Joe from You. But anyway, so like I had to do a lot of psychological research just to make sure like everything was kind of in the vein of where it should be, and you could still root for her and stuff. And I'm also a really bad cook, so like for one of my books that's going to come out next year, I was like, I have to figure out what the heck I'm doing. So like I was watching like all the baking shows, like even the bad ones. I forget what it's called. I think it's Nailed It, where it's like everybody like screws up really bad in the kitchen, because it's like we need that mix. I need to like be watching Gordon Ramsay and just like people, amateurs in their kitchen, because I am a disaster. But so I've been doing like research across the board, and that's my fun bits. But like, yeah.
So this question is a little bit, or could be related to the research question, but I think another stereotype, certainly about erotica, is that everything is sex, 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 like every second of every page, and that it's all focused on that, and there aren't real life things going on. All of your stories have realistic elements to them, things that I think people who don't read erotica wouldn't think of. Katrina, your story has a divorcee, and you mentioned her seeing a therapist. Mia, yours has a single mother. Naima, there's a plot line in your story that is also pretty dark. How do you balance elements of real life, however you want to take that real life, with the fantasy parts of erotica, the erotic parts of erotica? How do you combine those in your writing, and is that ever challenging for you?
Like for me, I have like, well, if you follow me on social media for like 5 minutes, then you know that my father's a pastor, and so I kind of like tap that a lot, and I tap him a lot for insight into people, and also like Mia, I'm kind of like a people watcher, and an ear hustler like her. So, I like to observe people. I'm a Dr. Phil lover, so I just love to study people. I love to just study behavior and what makes people tick and what affects people and the issues that affect people's lives, because no one is born in a bubble. And then to kind of incorporate how relationships, including sex, can be used to bring healing, to build relationships, to build trust, to build intimacy, not replace intimacy, but help build it, to take power and voice back, especially for women. So to me, it's kind of sex is a bridge for all of that. And so that's how I incorporate it. But I love touching on those real life issues because they shape who we are. So to not include them for me is to have one-dimensional and flat characters. And those are boring characters. Nobody wants that.
I think one of the things that I'm always thinking about, especially because in the past, including this story, the past 4 things I've published have been about queer women. And there's always the question of how much do I address the issue of homophobia and queerphobia? Because on the one hand, like, there's the sense that you want to create a world where that's not a problem right away, or where that's not the problem they have to solve. But at the same time, if you're like too escapist, then it feels like it's not really addressing something that the reader is bringing to the book. And you don't want to make the reader feel like they've noticed something you've forgotten, because then like it breaks the whole spell. And so the one advantage is that because people are expecting queer relationships to be a little harder, especially in historical settings, whether or not they actually were, like the research is like really eye-opening on this, but you kind of get a little bit of that like forbidden desire vibe, which is really kind of like a silver lining there. And I enjoy that. So there's always a sense that, my characters, especially whether or not they know they're attracted to other women, the sense of them, of it being a little bit dangerous, like on some level. And they think there's a real, you want to get that charge, but you don't want to make it so dangerous that it becomes, triggering or anxiety inducing. And that's a line I'm always trying to really I'm threading that needle very carefully, hopefully.
I love a character unhappy with their life. Like, it just seems like a nice place to sort of enter into like a moment. And for this one, I thought, I thought it, and I don't remember where this came from, like in the development. This is actually, I don't want to say an easy one to write, but it was an easy one to draft. Like the full draft came out really easily because Taisha made sense to me. Because I'm, overworked and sad a lot. I mean, but I think the thing I was sort of looking at happening in lots of different ways, people I know, people I don't know, are people who made really early decisions about relationships or about their jobs, and 10 years later they didn't feel the same way about those decisions. And Taisha's is specific. I mean, it's different, but that sort of disaffection you feel maybe in your 30s, where you realize, I don't know if this is a life I want to live, or I don't know if this is a thing I want to keep doing, I think is something I come back to in a lot of my stories, because it's just such a realistic thing. And when the theme was adventure, I thought well, what would an adventure be like for a woman who is divorced and on her own for the first time in over a decade, in a new city, a new part of the country, like a new job, like all of this stuff. And that adventure could feel really small to some people, but it's about the process. And like Naima said, like the sex becomes part of that process of her kind of testing the kind of contours of her own personality again as she finds herself, and realizes she's not exactly who she was when she was married or who she was before she was married, but that the possibilities for the future could be kind of endless.
Thank you. I'm not gonna like flip through my book in front of all of you, but something I thought was really interesting in your story, and then I think a lot of readers, especially women, can relate to, is that her husband had told her she was too much and kind of put her down and made her feel like she couldn't totally be herself. And I thought I really appreciated that through what happens in the story. She, I don't know if overcomes is the right word, but she moves forward from that kind of judgment.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I almost forgot what the question was.
It was about the real life
Yeah.
elements.
Yeah.
Evie or Mia? No pressure. Also, if you don't, if you can pass.
I think I like the balance of developing a character both in their sexual life and in their non-sexual life, and to watch a character kind of experience growth in both ways at the same time is very satisfying for me. It's kind of, it mirrors life, and me anyway. This was the first thing that I wrote after having the baby, and so like my brain was a mess. It was a total mess, and so I just kind of threw everything at the wall to see what stuck. And I can kind of see a little bit how the narrators like struggle to find this new identity alongside the identity they had before, was kind of what I was experiencing at the time of writing the book, and also kind of what I'm experiencing now. Like, how are you an author and a sexual person and also a mother and also this and also that? And so when you address all of those things in a romance, you're addressing the whole character. And so it's never been in opposition to me. It's always been parallel.
I like that idea that identities are lenses that overlap, but that aren't really separable.
The only thing I was going to say is like, because you guys are so interesting, I just want to like sit here and listen. One of the things I was going to say is like, a lot of times when I go into a scene, especially when I'm editing, I'm trying to remember, I'm like, okay, what are they learning about themselves? What are they learning about someone else? What are they learning about their environment? And I just think that like we're so constantly changing and learning stuff, even if we don't necessarily want to. And like then there's the friction there. But there's also so much beauty in it. And I think that's one of the great things about like romances and erotica is like there's so much to discover about ourselves like every single day, and about other people, and just like love in general. I mean, everyone has love languages, everyone. And so I think that's a nice thing.
Okay, I'm like I have like a lot of questions that I want to get to everyone's other questions. So what do you think makes a story sexy, whether a romance or erotica? What, as a reader, what do you look for when you want to read something sexy? And if you want to, you can recommend someone's work or just talk about it more generally.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Love banter. That's my big thing. I don't know why. It just like from the early days of the non-sexual, like watching Gilmore Girls, I'm like, what is this like quippiness? I love that. Like, I just love like chemistry between people, like an earnest, open chemistry. So that's pretty sexy to me. And then sometimes, I don't know, it's just like you have an emotional connection with something and you're like, okay, I'll come along. Kind of like when you hear a really good song for the first time and you start like tapping your foot, like, I don't know, it's a gut instinct.
kind of building on that, I love when there's at least one person in the relationship dynamic who pushes the other person or people just softly, like not like a sort of hard, kind of thing, but just someone who kind of pushes them toward the like edges of what they think, they can do, right? There's just nothing sexier, I think, than someone who can tease sexily, right? Who can sort of like kind of tease you into like trying a new thing or saying a thing you wouldn't normally say. It's like that kind of building of chemistry, like which works for me all the time.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump on that too. Like for me, I'm totally a character driven reader. Like for me, it can be the biggest paranormal, like 700-page paranormal book, or the grandest historical romance as far as setting, or just the simplest, plot. But it's always the characters that drive the book for me and make it sexy. It's who they are. So like their very core that will make me fall in love with a book, that will make it memorable for me, that will make it totally sexy and have me rereading certain passages over and over and over again. Like that. And it can be like, number one, I might read a book that, no, I won't. I'm not going to read a book that doesn't have sex in it. But, I'm just not. You might trick me, but you're not going to get me again. But even if it's like, because I just read a book by an author I totally love, and that love scene, I kid you not. I mean, that book, I kid you not, had like 1.5 love scenes in it, and I wasn't mad because number one, the love scenes were hot. The 1.5 love scenes were hot, but I wasn't mad because the characters were so amazing and the sexual tension was so hot. Their chemistry was so great. They were so beautiful together. They were so intelligent. They clicked. So I just loved it. So that's what makes it sexy, like a book sexy to me, is them. They create that world that just like grabs me and brings me in. But I'm damn glad there was sex in the book. That's all I'm gonna say. I'd have been hot.
And connecting to that, what always really kind of does it for me are the specifics, the things that make this person or this moment really special from everything else. So like Mia Hopkins, when you talked about his eye, like the tour guide's eyes being this kind of uncertain green, or the relationship with the scars and the ink in Naima Simone's excerpt that she read, really like, balloons obviously as well for Ellie. I'm never going to look at balloons the same way again. And Katrina Jackson always surprises me. So like
a turn of the phrase or something that she
yes,
has.
Some little truth that pops up. And that's really what pulls me through. Somebody realizing something, noticing something completely ordinary presented in a slightly new way. And that's where I feel kind of that excitement start to build. You get enough of those moments, and get enough of those, that kind of generation, like the sparks and the electricity start coming.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's in the details. I love stories where the characters are used to being misunderstood. Like they've become calloused almost to being misunderstood. They almost expect it from everyone they meet. And then they find each other and they're able to communicate through details. I'm gone. Like that's it. I'm reading a book right now by Michelle Hazen called Beneath the Sky. And it's about a biologist, and he's like a construction foreman in the desert. And they're turtles, like they're just little turtles, and then they meet each other, and you see these little turtle heads come out. And you're like, oh, well, that sounded horrible, but people come out of their shells.
And what are we talking about?
Yeah, erase that part. But they come together out of their shells, and they meet at like the tiniest moments, and I love that so much because I feel that's how it feels in real life. It's never like you don't connect over a grand gesture. Like that's at the end of the story. You
Right.
connect over like tiny things first. And it's so sexy to me.
I am going to read some questions from our viewers. Olivia, this question is for you, but if anyone else, well, this question is for you, but I guess if anyone else this applies to, you can answer too. Is it challenging to balance historical accuracy with a more contemporary sensibility around queer relationships?
Well, actually, one of the things that I've been discovering is the more you look into history, the more you go looking for specifically queer history, the more of it you seem to find. We're making discoveries about this all the time. And so I think the problem isn't that we have to try and bring a modern sensibility to history. The problem is we're not being modern enough about history. We're not seeing connections. There was a recent thing in the news where they discovered a diary of a perfectly ordinary farmer from a perfectly boring place in England. And he said he was talking in his diary about some men who'd been convicted of sodomy up the road. And he was like, I just don't get what the big deal is. They're not hurting anybody. Why should we care? And this is just this ordinary farmer guy. And he's like, maybe this is ridiculous. And so it's easy to like kind of collapse history down to these narrow stories that we tell over and over. Like that's where you get the endless dukes kind of, when like 99% of all the people in England were not dukes, but we, for some reason, have decided dukes are the story to tell about with romance. That's just a terrible example, but I think part of what I'm striving to do as somebody who dabbles in history up to a point and then just starts making things up is I want to try and use imagination to bridge the gap between the people of the past and the people who are alive now, because the sense of leaping over that gap and feeling a connection with people who have come before us is so important. And anything I can do to help kind of make that easier for readers and for humans is something I'm going to be very much interested in doing. So I guess the short version is I try not to let accuracy get in the way, because what we call accuracy is so often inaccurate.
That makes sense. I'm going to jump ahead to the next question. Naima, how is writing the story compared to writing your Harlequin books? And I'm going to expand it a little bit because I know a lot of you some of you write in different genres: historical romance, erotic romance, erotica. Some of you write in as one name and another name. So Naima, I'd like to hear from you on that, and I'd like to hear from anyone else who wants to talk about what it's like to write in different genres or subgenres. Like, is that a tension? Does it help you to have different kinds of writing you do to go back and forth? Or?
Well, the main difference is I can use words I cannot use. Like seriously, when I wrote my first Harlequin, I literally had to write my editor an email and say, what words can I not use? And then when she was editing that book, she had to explain to me how many clits I could use. I could use cock, but not as much as I use dick. And I was like, well, I'm confused. I don't know.
Were there actual?
I don't know which word I couldn't use.
Were there actual, like, you could only use things so many times? Did they make you take them out?
Yeah. And when I couldn't use, I just couldn't use that, the one I can't say out loud. So I had to get creative. I mean, I don't use flowery language at all because it's just not me, but I had to get creative on words that I could use. But all across the board, I mean, I don't write sweet. So I just have to get a little more creative on how I describe things. But yeah, for me, switching over from the Harlequin, which is more sensual rather than graphic, it's almost a palate cleanser to go back to erotic romance and just let my freak flag fly. And it feels really good to do it, where I can write as many of the P words and all that others I want to and be like, oh wait, no, I can write that, I'm good, you know. So it's almost a palate cleanser, and both of them are fun. It's just that I get to wear a different hat over on here. So yeah, so it's a little different. I just have to be more creative on how I present it with Harlequin.
I did have to ask somebody if Avon, which is also HarperCollins, had a policy on fisting.
Whoa, do they?
What was the answer?
Well, they said, I don't know, put it in and let's find out. And then I had to laugh for like 20 minutes. But it turns out, yeah, no, they're pretty okay with it. I mean, I didn't go overboard, but like, yeah, just like, okay, if they need to take it out, we can take it out. And no.
I want to know, here's the question. How does one go overboard on fisting? Like,
yeah,
what's the limit? Like, do
I
you
think that's
can
probably
you
gonna be an
write it for a paragraph?
decision.
That's hilarious.
I remember there's a book by Suleika Snyder. I think it's the one with the very angry chef.
Oh, Seared?
Seared, yeah. And that has, I think, the most fisting I've ever read in a romance. Like,
that's like seared. Like, let me write that down.
Katrina, I hope it's okay if I call on you, but you can tell me pass. But I know you write under another name as well. So I was curious, like, how do you balance those? Like, how do you know, like, what's a story for Katrina, what's a story for the other one? Or
I don't know. I don't know. I think that
you can name it if you want to. I don't think it's a total secret.
Oh yeah, it's not. It's Brandy Bush. And I don't know. I think that if I were the planning sort, which allegedly I used to be at some point in my life, I would have made a more firm split between what Katrina Jackson writes and what Brandy Bush writes. But to be honest, most of what I write is borderline erotica and erotic romance anyway. I think people are more shocked when it's not erotic romance. They're like, what the hell is this? Which is nice. If I had planned, I would have been more firm. But I do think that I love erotica. I don't come from a romance background. If I could only write erotica, I would probably be really happy. And I think I started the second pen name because I just wanted to write. I wanted to have a pen name that was just erotica. There will never be a romance, even if there are like romantic elements or there has been like a happily ever after. Like those novellas are always going to be sort of clearly erotica, and I wanted to have a place to just do that because it makes me happy.
Anyone else? I have a question. Do you see your work in romance, erotica, this area? Do you see it as feminist?
I see it all as feminist. I think romance, period. I think women writing, period, and us exercising our voice and writing books where women are using their voice to empower themselves, and writing roles where women are claiming their sexuality, claiming their roles, it's all feminist. So I think the fact that we're writing, period, is feminist. So
I like to ask, when people ask me, is romance feminist? I like to ask, are women feminist? Like, because it's the same kind of big question. Like, I do think Naima hits it right on the head just by having a genre that is so devoted to many women's voices. I think that's hugely important. But I also know that there's a lot of ways in which the genre could be significantly more feminist and more inclusive. And that's I think something we're all kind of working on.
We have a goal, you know. Yeah, it's something that we should never stop working toward and trying to improve and be better at.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I agree to an extent. I think my work is like very solidly like me, Black feminist, and sort of based in the sort of like ideas of like pleasure and the body and things that Black feminists have been really concerned with since about the 1960s. So it like I don't know if I could have written any other way. My work is also like sex worker positive, which not a lot of feminist groups are. I think my work is hopefully a reflection of my own politics and also like pushing and challenging my own politics. So there's like a dialogue there for me personally.
Yeah. This sense of always wanting to do a bit better is really important to that, I think. That's something I'm always trying as well.
Do you have any advice for someone new to writing romance and or erotica? Or something you wish you'd known when you started, or something you've learned along the way?
It's like super awkward. You can do it by yourself, but just like you catch so much more when you're reading it out loud that you're just like, what am I talking about? Or like, just, sometimes it's awesome. And then you're like, it's a nice ego boost. But anyway, my suggestion is to read parts out loud to yourself and maybe catch it that way. Or you can put it in that like dictation software. So that's just like an editing thing. And find good
use that, and it's really weird when they say like pussy and dick. Like, whoa, what's happening here, computer?
I have never done that, but now you're making me want to.
You have to try.
Choose your dictation voice carefully.
Oh yeah, play around with the voice too, so then you can have an experience. Yeah. All right, that's one.
True, because like these books are made in like the best women's erotica. They're made into audiobooks, and I'm not sure if people always realize that their work's going to be read by someone, and that person's job is to make it sexy. So, if you have clunky dialogue or if you have weird things that wind up. I mean, in my books, obviously it's on me as the editor not to have that, but stuff happens. But yeah, like when you hear it out loud, it's really different than reading it on the page. Because I think your eyes can maybe skip over that a little bit more, but when you hear it, you can't unhear it.
Another tip I had heard is like when you're done, like when you're trying to read through it for like the 8th time, try changing the font, and then it's like new, or like you can change like the background color of the page too. Anyway, there's all these little tiny ones.
Now I'm gonna try this stuff. After these
Any
years.
other advice?
I think the most important thing that I've learned in the past few years is if you find something that you love, just write it as hard as you can and don't let anybody tell you you're wrong to do it. I took a huge leap forward as a writer when I started letting myself use all the adjectives I'd always wanted to use. But no, I was supposed to be restrained. I was supposed to be very correct and not too much description. And turns out that's a good way for me to be a bad writer. And so, yeah.
I definitely agree with that. I had to, when I first started writing, my first book was erotic romance. And I had to turn off my inner sex editor, like, because I told myself, no, you can't write that because somebody's going to read that and they're going to think you're freak. And so I had to turn that off and just write like I was going to be the only one reading it. And I know what I love to read. Just write it, and write what you love to read, or write what you're comfortable with, what you're comfortable writing and what you love to read, and just do it. Because one of the best pieces of advice I was given is you can edit shit, but you can't edit nothing. So just write it, write the hell out of it, and edit it later.
You can even slip in like fix this later in little brackets, and then it counts and your head has been tricked into moving on.
That's right. I can't do that. I can't do it at all. I tried it. Just like I've tried write sex later here. No, you gotta write sex now. My brain is like, nah, I have to write this sex now.
But you don't know what's going to be on the other end. You have to write it to see how they
I have
change.
to write the sex then. It's like, no. Orgasm now, damn it. Now.
I have another t-shirt slogan. People in the comments.
We're gonna be rich at the end of this
They
thing.
want it as a t-shirt, so any other writing advice?
Kind of related to write whatever you want, write whatever you feel strongest about, is don't get hung up on the first project. Your goal is to create a body of work. And so, work on your first project. If you're interested in submitting it, querying it, go ahead and do that. Start on your next project. And it kind of like, inevitable rejections happen. And so it kind of like pads your heart a little bit because you know that you have other things in the pipeline. You have a lot to offer. Your goal is to create a body of work, not just one project.
Good one. I'm a testimony to that one.
Yeah, there's not many writers out there who say, well, the first thing I ever wrote was the best thing I've ever written and nothing else has lived up to it. Nobody says that.
Okay, I have two final questions before we wrap up. Pretty quick. I know we've talked about a few other people's books tonight. Can you recommend one very sexy book by someone who's not on our call? Because I hope you're all reading everyone's work or about to read it. You don't have to read them all tonight, but you can get them all from Love Sweet Arrow or your local library. We love libraries. Well, I love libraries. I hope everyone loves libraries. Yeah, could you recommend a sexy book and maybe tell us why you think it's sexy?
Well, my all-time favorite go-to erotic romance is Wicked Burn by Beth Carey. And like I said before, why I love sexy books, it's the characters right from the beginning. The chemistry is amazing. There's this backstory that runs through that's just so deeply emotional, and the sex is off the charts hot, but it's the way she weaves it in with the characters. And Beth Carey is a goddess with as far as erotic romance. I mean, the writing is amazing, but those characters are just, they're combustible together. And it's it's like my go-to erotic romance book. And I've read it over and over and over again.
Well, I have
One of my
different
cats
levels.
fighting in the background. Tasha L. Harrison's If She Says Yes was just dirty. Like exactly what I wanted. Like just filthy from the very first page. Best friend's mom, filthy. If She Says Yes.
Came out, right?
Just came out.
No, you can't see it. I have the cover.
Oh, is
The
that?
cover is also filthy. It just does not lie to you. Does not lie to you.
Mia is dedicated.
Ah!
Yeah, yes.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Hey.
I think turn your head sideways. Yeah.
That's hot.
I have a romance with erotic that was recent, which was Red, White, and Royal Blue, which is like two guys, and it's awesome if you want like a prince and a son of the president. But then for sexy stuff, I would probably do, there's actually another anthology, a Dirty Daddies anthology, if you're just curious about that kink. I don't know. I was introduced to a lot of new authors, kind of like in this, like it's been amazing. So that's my current recommendation.
I just started the, we talked about my feelings on Dukes, which are usually negative, but the anthology Duke I'd Like to Fuck just came out. And it is like, and I had never read any Sierra Simone before that, but that first story just like blew the hair back on my head kind of a thing. It was so sexy and painful and gorgeous and hot, and I was super into it. So I immediately finished the story, and then I'm like, I have to put this to it. Like I have to like drop it in a chunk of ice so it cools down for like a minute. But it was really excellent. And I know there's other authors in that anthology whose work I've read and loved. So I'm looking forward to that.
So good.
Let's see. I love Sierra Simone. And so Priest was a huge influence on Thirsty. Huge.
I felt so bad reading that, considering my father's a pastor. I tore it up though, and I felt I couldn't look at him for like a week.
Can I just say the Sinner audiobook is also filthy? Like that is one of the best audiobooks ever.
No, I gotta
just
go listen to
so
it.
much.
Hear it on audio. Oh man.
Oh, it's so much.
Audio. No, I gotta
I
go.
was blushing, like walking around my house, like just blushing. It was a mess. It's so good.
I gotta go listen.
So we have to wrap up. I have one more question, but thank you. I want to thank all of you. I could keep talking to you for much longer. So thank you. My next question is, what are you writing next, and where can people find you? We can go in whatever order.
Okay, well, I'm working on my HQN series, the Rose Ben series, and the next book in my Harlequin Desire series. So it's a bearded guy, which I love because, you know, beard. So that's me.
I just turned in book 3 of the Feminine Pursuit series, and it's an enemies to lovers FF historical heist. It is a ton of fun. This book was my escape from quarantine. Everything, like there's like 3 scenes where something is sparkling and rainbow colored, even though it's the Regency. So, you know, like it was a good time, and I had a ton of fun. And yeah. And normally you can find me hanging out on Twitter as O_Waite, WAITE.
Olivia, what's that one called?
It's called The Hellions Waltz.
Oh, cool title.
And the cover is so gorgeous. They haven't let me show anybody yet. It's just the rough. But I really just wanted to like splash it on Twitter for like days at a time. It's so gorgeous. I'm so in love. I'm so excited.
What about everyone else? What are you working on next, and where can we find you?
I have a Daddy and Little story coming out in January that's very sweet with a demisexual little, like, so that basically means she's on a spectrum, so like she doesn't feel sexual attraction until there's an emotional connection, and it's like preciousness combined with a lot of sex, and it'll be at the end of January. And I'm Evie Bennet Books on everything, but I'm usually on Instagram if you want to chat.
And where can we find that story?
General publishing.
Oh, is it?
It'll be up. I'll post it. Are you talking about the publisher?
Probably, yeah.
It's with Blushing Books.
Mia.
I'm still working on Tanked, guys. Thank you for your patience. You can find me on Twitter, which is probably why you're not getting tanked yet. But it's at Mia Hopkins XOXO.
I'm working on like a few things as usual. I'm just a mess, but I'm working on a free holiday serial called Sex Toy Soldier, which is on my newsletter. And then I'm working on a prequel novella in My Spies Who Loved Her series called Bright Lights, which should come out the day after Christmas. I am trying to not be on Twitter, so my Instagram is Kat Jackson Books.
I love the name Sex Toy Soldier. Like, I don't know what it's about. I don't know what to expect, but I was like, okay, even if I wasn't a fan, you would have me at Sex Toy Soldier.
I was hoping.
Thank you, Love Sweet Arrow. I hope everyone will check out our book. You can get it from Love Sweet Arrow. Thank you everyone for reading and chatting. This was super fun. That's it.